Good morning. Welcome to the Stylo Intel Update. Today, our focus is on Southeast Asia, a region facing some significant challenges. We're going to break down the key pressures at play, from an intense civil war to rising tensions at sea, all to give you a clearer picture of the situation. And just so you know, this intelligence briefing is brought to you by ProWave AI, the minds behind the Stylo Intel Ops platform. All right, so looking at the map here, you can see just how dynamic Southeast Asia is, with several areas demanding our attention. Our analysis shows that regional stability is being tested from a few different directions, and we're about to walk you through exactly what that means. Now, to really get a handle on what's going on, we've broken it down into three primary pressure points. You can think of these as the main forces shaping events across the region right now. So, what are they? Well, our assessment points to three overlapping threats. First, there's internal conflict brewing within nations. That, in turn, is connected to friction between countries at sea. And all of this is set against a backdrop of serious global economic pressure. So let's dive into that first one. And first up is Myanmar. What began as a crisis within its own borders is now starting to spill over, and that has major consequences for everyone in the neighborhood. To put it bluntly, the civil war in Myanmar is the single biggest destabilizing factor on mainland Southeast Asia today. The central government's grip is slipping, armed resistance groups are gaining ground, and this is creating a power vacuum with some very serious implications.
And this is a really important point. This conflict is not staying contained. The fighting you're looking at here is happening right along vital trade corridors, which means the instability is directly impacting neighboring economies.
You know, this kind of instability creates a ripple effect. We're talking about massive flows of refugees into Thailand, India, and Bangladesh. We're seeing a big uptick in illegal arms and drug trafficking, not to mention the rise of these cross-border criminal enterprises, like those large-scale scam hubs. It puts a tremendous strain on regional security and, frankly, it makes it much harder for the Association of Southeast Asian Nations, or ASEAN, to act with a single unified voice. So, that's the pressure from within. Now, let's shift our focus to pressure from the outside, moving from the mainland out into the contested waters of the South China Sea. What we're witnessing here is a classic gray zone conflict. It's not an outright war, but it certainly isn't peace either. On one side, you've got the Philippines and its allies running military drills to defend their sovereignty, and on the other, you have China using its Coast Guard and maritime militia to assert its own claims, essentially dialing up the pressure without ever firing a shot. Our own assessment is pretty clear on this. Any sort of miscalculation in these waters could cause things to escalate, and escalate fast. Of all the friction points in the region, this is the one most likely to spark a real crisis between nations.
Take this number, 17,000. That's how many troops were involved in the recent joint military exercises. Now, the idea is to deter aggression, to show strength. But there's a flip side. A show of force this large could also be seen as a provocation, potentially leading to a countermove from China and increasing the risk of a dangerous encounter at sea.
Okay, finally, let's zoom out for a moment. It's important to remember these regional issues aren't happening in a vacuum. There are much larger economic and geopolitical forces at play, and they're adding another layer of pressure to the entire region. For example, a conflict in the Middle East might seem a world away, but its effects are being felt right here. Countries across Southeast Asia are now facing real concerns about their energy security and the impact of inflation, putting a significant strain on their economic stability. And you can actually see this vulnerability reflected in the hard numbers. The Asian Development Bank recently had to revise its growth forecast for 2026 down to 4.7%. And that projection is based on the assumption that the conflict in the Middle East continues. Now, in the midst of all this pressure, we're also seeing a really interesting geopolitical shift. A recent survey shows that for the first time, a slim majority of people in the region, 52%, say they would prefer to align with China over the US. That's a pretty significant reversal, and it's likely driven by China's powerful economic influence and, perhaps, some regional uncertainty about the consistency of American foreign policy. So, with all of that in mind, the question is, what should we be watching for next? Well, we've identified a few critical indicators that will likely tell us which way the winds of regional stability are blowing. First, keep a very close eye on maritime activity in the South China Sea, especially around those flashpoints like Second Thomas Shoal. Then, inside Myanmar, watch for any signs of instability from the ruling junta in the capital that could signal a major shift.
On the border, the city of Myawaddy is a key place to watch for conflict spilling over into Thailand. And finally, pay attention to the diplomatic statements coming out of ASEAN. They serve as a crucial barometer of the region's political cohesion.
Now, this has just been a high-level briefing. If you want to go deeper and understand the trends behind these events, you can listen to our full 2-week analysis. The link for that is right in the description. And that concludes this intelligence update. For AI-powered news on demand, we invite you to subscribe at stylonews.com. Thank you for joining us.